Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the City Council's first ever Meet the Artist event. If this is successful, we hope to do more of these events. Cambridge has a reputation nationally and internationally for public art, and it's always wonderful to hear an artist talk about their work. Please bear with us if there are any technical issues or difficulties, as this is a first for us. My name is Nadine Black and I'm the Public Art Officer at the City Council. The To the River project has been taking place for nearly 2 years. With COVID, we've lost some momentum on this and other projects in the council, and it's very difficult to organise community meetings at this time. So we thought that it would be a good idea to create a Meet at the Artist event and hopefully move forward this way, re-engaging people. To the River is a City Council commission and it's funded using Section 106 contributions, which is funding the council receives from developers and is used to mitigate the impact of development. There's strict criteria for how we spend the money and where we can spend the money. There has to be a geographical link from where the funding comes from for us to commission a project. We established, looking at the funding we had, that there was the potential to create a project on the river. And so we decided to create a project to celebrate the story of the River Cam in Cambridge. The project is based around a year-long artist in residence for the River Cam. This allows an artist to engage in extensive research and engagement, and this work will culminate in a permanent site-specific work somewhere along the river. The residency enables an artist to live and breathe the riverside, and also a sustained dialogue with the community, which develops over time. The artist brief for the commission is open. There were no preconceptions about what the outcome would be, and it allowed an artist to respond to the project according to their own practice. After a recruitment process, artist Caroline Wright was appointed as artist in residence for the River Cam. Caroline will tell you more about her work so far and set the scene for the future direction of the project. We'll begin with a short film, followed by a presentation from Caroline. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them as you think of them. We're also supported by a KUA from the Arts Development team. Caroline, would you like to show the film?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just wanted us all to think about how important water is. This has been a really precious thing that's been carried by so many people in so many different ways. This has been a really precious thing, and it's something that maybe so many can take for granted. Flow is all about that, and it's all about people using the river. Flow is all about that, and it's all about people using the river.
Thank you, Caroline. Just to introduce properly, Caroline Wright, who is the artist in residence for the River Cam. And as I said, Caroline's been working for about 18 months so far as artist in residence. Caroline, I wonder if I could ask you how you heard about the project.
I first heard about yes, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak, Nadine, and thank you, Akua, for being here to support this event. It's great to have an opportunity to talk to people through the screen because I've missed being in Cambridge and meeting everyone face to face. And that's one of the reasons when I heard about the project that I was very attracted to it. It was actually sent to me, the details of the project brief were sent to me by several people within the space of 2 or 3 days. So I felt like it was calling to me, and people were suggesting I might be interested in it. Moreover, I am very interested in water. I'm interested in our environment. and I enjoy and feel it's really important to work with people and to generate ideas that come out of the things that are important to people about the places that they live, the places they work, and the environment they inhabit. So there were a lot of different reasons why working in Cambridge and applying for this project felt right. Not only that, although I don't live in Cambridge, I have a long affiliation with the city. I have lived there in the past for a number of years. My children were all born in the city. And so it is a place that's somewhere I know and somewhere that I have a real fondness and affiliation with.
Thank you. For you, what did the project entail? You know, when you saw that brief and you were appointed?
Well, I think the first and foremost, it entailed an element of importance to coming out with a permanent work that would conclude the project. But leading to that was this opportunity to engage with the public and to allow conversations and time and research to feed into ideas. It's a generously, the length of the project is generous and actually even more generous now we've had the delays with COVID, which has been both unfortunate and one could say fortunate in terms of timing. So I think that, you know, it entails that community engagement work which leads to the final project outcome. It also entailed for me a greater understanding of what the river is in the city. On a personal note, to start with, I just spent some time walking the river, cycling along the river. And this map illustrates the breadth, the length of the river that the project covers. So from Trumpington, where the main road crosses the river, right up towards Fen Ditton. So that's quite a stretch of river through the Cambridge wards. I think almost 10 miles if you walk it and you follow the actual river path. And that really surprised me. So it made it very clear to me that this was a river that changed and morphed and altered its character according to where one was along its length. It went from quite a sort of, should we say, an open environment to flowing through the city centre, where it was bounded by the historical buildings with many bridges across it. It's something that was seen by the train line crossing over on the bridge, and then you get towards Trumpington where you've got sort of nooks and crannies and fishermen sitting on their platforms in the under the trees, so the light levels are very different. So this river has such a different set of characteristics as you walk its length. So initially for me, you know, the project entailed just getting to know the river in a more intimate way than perhaps I had before I started the work.
Thank you. Is there anything that surprised you through this period of research?
Actually, there's quite a lot that surprised me. My own ignorance about the river. I think that, yeah, as I've said, in terms of it, the geography and the characteristics of the river, I hadn't realised quite what a range there was before I started on the project. I think I was also quite surprised at the depth of political and the political and social connections with the river that could be both contentious but also could be very positive, and I hadn't grasped fully the depth of feeling around those, and also certainly the way that the river is boundaried. So how we approach a river in terms of it being something that we are familiar with. It cuts through the land. We see rivers on maps. We're looking at a map now, but in fact, you know, this river also has quite a few sort of policed sections. You can punt in certain parts, you can row in certain parts, you can swim in certain parts. And so I suppose I was surprised by that compartmentalisation as the river runs through the city.
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you've engaged with the local community and, you know, some elements of the residency that have taken place.
Yes, for sure. I've sort of started off, and I'll just flip to this next image. So I started off doing some research at the wonderful Museum of Cambridge, who've been really supportive to the project, and went through their archives and wanted to just get a sense of the history of the use of the river, and came across this photo, which I absolutely love. It's the Lion Hotel staff outing on the river. And I think it immediately, for me, sums up the importance of the river, the place of the river, both for leisure, but also somewhere where people can connect and come together. And of course, what's so great is how formally dressed everybody is on this outing. So I started with some research there. I then moved on to work with some lovely young children and families alongside the river on a warm summer's day, and asking these young children what did they think of the river, and asked them to draw their imaginary and their actual understanding of the river, what was in the river, what was above the river, what was on the river. And I think these three wonderful drawings exemplify the sort of things they were thinking about, from both the fantastical, you know, the frog with her crown sitting there at the bottom, but alongside the very pragmatic, the Tesco's bag floating down into the deep, which perhaps brings forth another aspect of the river that we should all be aware of, that it's something that we need to look after and care for. And I thought that, you know, the children really summed up that for them the river was a place of life, a place of activity, a place where they could let their imagination run riot as to what was below the water that they could see, what was below the surface. So this was a really, really lovely moment for me that was very significant in within the early days of the project. I also wanted to just mention this, which was a very special day I had with May and Mike, who undertake voluntarily river sampling. And this is done on a little tributary off the Cam called the Rush that winds its way across Sheep's Green. And every month, on behalf of the Wildlife Trust, the Environment Agency and various angling associations, they undertake the River Cam as part of this national initiative by collecting water and then analysing it for the number of invertebrates and species that they can identify. So, you know, they find things like the caddisfly in there, and a wonderful couple who are completely committed to the river. I think Mike was a water engineer at one point, and May remembers as a very keen swimmer jumping off a diving board into the Cam as a young girl. So not only do they look after and care for their river now, but it has a place in their past as well. This really is an image that sums up the film that we saw at the beginning, which was one of the first works that I made as part of the community engagement. This was a piece called Flow, as you'll have seen in that video. And it was a container of water that was carried along the river from Batesfite's Lock up to Trumpington towards Byron's Pool, by as many people as possible, by as many different means of transport. So people rode, people cycled, people walked, ran, swam, as you saw in the video images, carrying this cargo of water. And I think this really highlighted for me the many and widely different connections and ways that people use and relate to the river. And you know, for some people it's where they live, it's also their livelihood. And you know, the river is something they utterly respect, and they want everybody else to do the same, as we should. And for others, it's just there. It's a constant. It flows. They probably don't notice it too much. They walk alongside it. It's a lovely open space, but it's just like a backdrop to their life. One of the questions that I asked people was, what actually is a river? Is it the bank? Is it the water? And it was an interesting mix of answers that people gave, because for some it was the division through the land, that fissure that cuts through, that's filled with flowing water. For others it was only the water, that was the thing. The bank, the geography around it didn't count as the river. And I think that for me was a very interesting thing to learn, that we all understand a river slightly differently. This image shows the most amazing woodcut by the artist Gwen Ravarat. Gwen Ravarat was Darwin's granddaughter, and she lived and practiced as an artist in the early 1900s. Her husband died very young, so she was a single mother, and she worked as an artist to support her family. She made a number of beautiful paintings and extremely accomplished wood engravings and woodcuts of the River Cam, taking different positions to create her images from. And I was quite interested in perhaps what had led her to choose the particular viewpoints she had. So I spent a bit of time researching where I thought she might have stood in order to create each image. And from that information, I've compiled a booklet, which is, in this case, you can see it's in physical form, but it's also available as a downloadable PDF that's interactive. And in this booklet, you can see on the lower right, you can see a map with the river in blue, and you can probably just pick out some pink on there, which is where Gwen Ravarat would have sat to create the image on the left-hand top page. And on the right there, you can see the image as it is now, a photograph of the bridge as it is now. And then on the bottom left, you can see the map reference, the title of the work, size of the work, and some information. If you download the digital PDF onto your phone, you can click onto that map reference and it will take you straight to Google Maps and give you a route so that you can walk around Cambridge and go and find exactly the place where Gwen Ravarat sat to create her image. But what's really interesting is that this one is very recognisable. But some of them have a little bit of artistic license that Gwen has used. So she's maybe just manoeuvred a tree or slightly changed an angle of something for the purpose of composition. And certainly one discovery we made was that one image is reversed. So she's mirrored it. And anyone who is familiar with printmaking will know that when you create an image on a print plate and you print it onto paper, as you turn it over, it reverses the image. So what's interesting is one of the images she did is actually in a mirror image of the actual landscape. So it was a fascinating process to go through and try to somehow sort of relive Gwen's decision-making process. And I took this information to Anglia Ruskin University and worked with some of the students there for them to create a contemporary response to Gwen's images and also from her particular viewpoints. There we go. Another way that I wanted to connect with people was to think about what the river is in terms of the way we respond to it as we're walking around the town. Cambridge is so known for its tourist trade and for all the visitors that come to the city. And I was struck when I was walking around that there were lots of people who were looking at the river, but it was more as a stage set or a backdrop, and they weren't actually analysing the river, but they were using it as a background for them to take a selfie. So I started a social media campaign and asked people to send in images of what colour they thought the river was through photography. And these are some of the results that came back, which is amazing when you look at the difference in colour, but potentially obviously a reflection of light and time of day and weather conditions, but the most amazing collection of photographs of the river water. And the final piece of work that I want to talk about in terms of connecting with the community was called Knit for the River. And this took place, this particular poster was for an event on the 8th of September, but there were a number of different knitting events that were held the length and breadth of the river in the Cambridge wards. And we had, well over 150 people who took part, and everybody was invited to knit a small square and to, if they wanted to, they could choose their own pattern. I love this one because it makes me think of waves and the flow of the river. So we ended up with, I think, maybe 400 or 500 small squares, which were knitted together and ended up being used to help to shore up parts of the riverbank that were eroded. Not only that, meeting all those wonderful people who were knitting gave me a great opportunity to get to know them, to get to know what they thought about the river, and to chat. I mean, if anyone has ever knitted or crocheted, part of it is social, part of it is about the chat that happens while you're knitting in real time. And so we use the knitting to support these coir rolls impregnated with plants. And I'm going to just show you a little extract, just a short part of an extract of a film that, if you just bear with me, hopefully this will work. I won't show you the whole thing.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm just having memories of Knit for the River, where I learned that I cannot knit and will never be able to knit, I have to be honest, but thank you for that. In terms of all of the different projects and engagement you've done so far, are there any things that really stand out for you?
Oh goodness, I think yes, I would say certainly the widely different connections that people have, and the varying uses, but I think particularly there's a feeling of reassurance of the constancy of a river, and the fact that it has this flow, that it's very mesmerizing, and that essentially the river is truly the water that's encased within those banks. And whether people swim, they don't swim, whether they walk by the river or they don't walk by the river, they have an image of a river that is something that is just part of their life. It's a natural feature. And within Cambridge, I think what's come through particularly is the very different ways and the most important ways, and the importance that the river has in terms of people's different ways of existing, so their livelihood, their home, or just somewhere to visit. I say just, it is somewhere amazing to visit, or just something that they know is there, and perhaps they take it a little for granted, but they would really miss it if it wasn't there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So all of the time you've spent as artist in residence for the river and engaging with people and researching is also in tandem, I suppose, in the process leading up to developing a more permanent work somewhere along the river. I just wondered if you could talk about, you know, the plans for how that might go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some emerging themes that I'm working with quite closely, which tie in with what I've just described. In addition to this constancy and this sort of reflection and thinking process that people have about the river, it's also, I think, about water and water levels, the importance of keeping that river flowing, of looking after it. I've noticed there's so much care people have for the river. So I think the notion of viewpoints, movement, water levels, the constancy and reflection are all themes that I'm working on at the moment. And all of those will feed quite strongly into the permanent work.
Thank you. And as that happens, and when we get to the point, we will be sharing any ideas as we go forward with the project. So that would be great. That maybe we can do something like this again, that talk about more definite ideas for the project. I just wondered, it would be great if we can point people in the direction of if they're wanting to find out more information. So I think it would be helpful that, you know, we have a project website.
Yes, I've got a slide right there. So yeah, and people will find on that website, they'll find information about the river, information in the form of a journal of all the different aspects of engagement that I've done and wonderful people that I've met along the way. They'll also find links to the videos and a link to that digital PDF if they want to download that to see the viewpoints of Gwen Ravarat's prints. And there's a little sneak preview of some of the work made by the Anglia-Ruskin University students in response to the Gwen Ravarat research, which we hope to make public as well at some point once we're able to get out and about more easily.
Thank you. Yes, I hope that can happen soon too. Well, thank you, Caroline. It's been great to hear and to remind people actually what's been happening in this project, and you know, a great opportunity to engage with people as we go forward again. So thank you for your time, Caroline, and Akua, thank you for supporting us.
Yeah, thank you.